Hi guys, I'm Jay and welcome to the Season 7 Elise Jungle Guide. So this one is a rehash of the one that I did for last season. Also as well for this video, keep in mind that we have actually just gone through the mid-season patch change, so there's a lot of different stuff, especially for the AP items, which does affect Elise. So keep in mind that everyone's kind of experimenting at the moment, but I'm trying to give you what I think is best and what generally other people also think is pretty good as well. As for the leveling order on Elise, you're going to be wanting to start W, then go for Q, and then E. Obviously maxing Q since that is your main damage source, it's your main ability, really short cooldown. Then maxing W next since the E is pretty much a 1-point wonder, I guess you could say. The 1.6 second stun at rank 1 is perfectly fine, and then the W is also more damage, more attack speed, etc. in the spider form. Speaking of the spider form as well, that is one thing that you're probably going to need to get used to, unless you're used to playing like Nidalee and stuff like that. But Elise actually has the double form, so obviously pressing R switches the forms. And that actually grants Elise 6 abilities because QWE, and then also in a spider form she also has the QWE as well, so that's why Elise's early game is actually very, very strong. The masteries on Elise, you're going to be wanting to run the 12-18-0. This is pretty much because Elise's early game is her strongest, and you want the most damage possible to actually be able to snowball the early game for you and your laners to win the game as fast as possible. Because of this, that means you're going to be taking Thunderlord's Decree, and as you might have guessed, Elise is an AP burst mage, so the Thunderlords obviously gives her that little bit of extra burst to help her do even more damage. As for the runes that you're going to be wanting to run on Elise, as with most champions, these can actually differ quite a lot. So for Elise, you'll see quite a lot of pages. Some people run like just full flat AP, some people will run like Magic Pen and AP and all that other stuff. But the one that I'm showing you now is kind of just a general AP page. It's also very, very strong for Elise. So what you're going to be wanting to run is the attack speed on reds, the armor or HP per level on yellows. It's sort of a preference really. Elise doesn't really take that much damage because obviously your spiderlings can tank the jungle monsters, but obviously a little bit of armor is really nice when especially when you're learning Elise as well, because you will take a bit of damage from that. And then your blues can either be CDR or AP. I personally prefer the flat AP just because obviously you do more damage that way, and then obviously you can snowball your early game and other stuff like that. And then same for the quints as well, it's just flat AP, gives you extra damage, you clear the jungle faster, you do more damage. So the flat AP actually puts a lot of emphasis on Elise's early game, where she is actually at her strongest. The later and later you actually go into a game, the more likely you are to lose in aspect, because obviously junglers, even like Lee Sin, Graves, obviously Ivan, they all outscale you. So obviously you can still win. I'm not saying you can't win after like 20 minutes, but the chances are less and less because you do get outscaled and you don't do as much damage, and you're pretty much just a cocoon bot at that point. As for the starting items on Elise that you're going to want to run, I would actually highly recommend the Talisman, especially when you're actually very first starting off. However, you will actually see as well in a lot of Korean games, a lot of the Elises will actually run Machete. So you'll see this mostly when they actually do start on blue, because they obviously have the mana sustain already from the blue. However, you will actually see some of the more advanced Elise players, for example like Peanut, or there's a Elise one trick as well on Korea. I believe LS said his name was like Rehope or something like that. He starts Machete like no matter what. Like even if he starts on Raptors, he'll start Machete, which might seem really weird. But the reason he actually does this is because on Elise you don't really want to be constantly clearing. So really the general thing that you do on Elise is only clear a camp when obviously you are actually going to get a level up from it. So obviously if you're very close to level 4, you'll clear like wolves before going top or something like that. So that's the general thing that you want to be doing. However, obviously when you're first starting Elise, I would highly recommend just going Talisman, because obviously you're going to have more mana to do what you want, and you're not going to be completely out of mana, and then obviously your clears being slowed down and such. But even if you are quite experienced on Elise, you can actually still run Talisman if you really want. Machete does actually speed it up a little bit faster, obviously because you are auto-attacking quite a lot, and the actual on-hit and extra sustain, etc. actually does speed you up. But really, it's not a massive thing if you do actually start with Talisman instead of Machete. Not a really huge, like you're not going to lose a game because of it. It's all really about your early game on Elise and how you're actually using your pressure, so the starting items are not really that big. Now moving on to the item build, so as well as I said at the very beginning, keep in mind that we have actually just gone through the mid-season patch, so that means that a lot of the AP items have been changed. For example, the Abyssal Scepter and Banshee's Veil have actually been swapped, and we've had an introduction of some new items as well. However, regardless of this, I would probably say you still want to go for the general core items of like Runic Echoes, the Andries, and then you can either go Tanky or Rallies if you do want, although Rallies obviously with the slight nerfs that it received isn't as good. Although against a lot of melee champions, Rallies is incredibly strong in Elise, because you do have your spider, like your spiderlings, you have the big AoE spider that does a lot of slow damage, and then your Q, etc. You have so many abilities to actually slow people with, so against a lot of melee champions I would highly recommend going Rallies. Something as well that I do want to mention is that mobility boots on Elise are incredibly good. So what you really want to do with this, the general thing that you'll see a lot of Korean Elises do this as well, is they'll go Mobi boots, and then later on they'll maybe switch out for maybe about 25 minutes-ish, 20 minutes, they'll actually switch on to something like, Merc treads or even Sork boots if they're actually ahead. Something that I would actually recommend that you do, especially if you are learning Elise, and I even do this sometimes as well, is you go for Runic Echoes, Liandry's, and then into a more tanky build with, you know, like Merc Treads or Ninja Tabby, or you can even go Lucidity Boots as well, so you have 40% CDR, because as you do transition later on into the game, you are pretty much just a Cocoon bot, and you're just going to be peeling for carries, so having Liandry's for the melting tanks that dive into your ADC and all that stuff, it actually does really help. So for the pathing on Elise, you're actually going to be really wanting to take advantage of Elise's early game. So as you see on screen now, I believe this is for the red side, but it also does work on the opposite side. So you can do things, the general thing that you really wanted to do anyway is pretty much so like you'll do buff to camp to buff, so like red buff to wolves to blue, something like that. But you really wanted to be prioritizing your stronger lanes. So for example, if you have like Ezreal Soraka bot lane, you don't really want him to go there because there's not really much you can do, there's not that much setup at all. However, if you have like a Renekton top lane, or like a TF mid, or LeBlanc even, like very strong assassin lanes, or just very easy setup, so like Lissandra or something like that, you really want to prioritize that lane because you can snowball off it and also they can as well. So with Elise, it's really all about pathing and pretty much, I guess, time management and being really effective, because you don't really want to waste time going to lanes that you're not really going to get anything out of. So like I said, Ezreal, Soraka, like there's not really much you can do there unless Soraka lands a really good silence and they get snared by the silence. Like there's not really that much you can do. Obviously, if the actual enemy lane is super pushed up, then you might actually be able to do something, but even then, Soraka's not exactly like a setup support or by any means. Something like a Leona or Brand, something that has like a very easy to hit stun that can actually set up into your Cocoon. And that pretty much about wraps up this guide. I hope it actually did help you. If it did, don't forget to leave a like. I would actually highly recommend playing Elise as well. She's actually really fun to play. I go through phases of really enjoying Elise to find her very boring, but at the moment anyway, she's actually really strong because of obviously the real early game emphasis, and especially against the tank junglers. Like you'll see now Sejuani being played. Elise does really well into Sejuani. Obviously not late game, but early on you can abuse Sejuani quite a lot because you're far stronger than she is early. And the same also goes for a lot of the other junglers as well against Elise, since she has a very strong level 3 fight. So your 2v2s and stuff like that are very strong, even your 1v1s, because obviously you have a 1.6 second stun at level 3 when you actually have access to the Cocoon, which is a long time in a very early game fight. And since people don't really have tenacity or anything like that, unless it's a tank jungler taking in masteries obviously, but even then it's a very long time for a stun. And it does give you a lot of time to actually hit them where they can't hit you. As well, also catching people off guard, so you know, you're just sitting in a bush waiting and they walk past trying to do Scuttle Crab and you just Cocoon, launch your entire combo and they just die instantly. So as well, just remember that your early game is the strongest on Elise. Also invading the enemy jungler is also very good, especially against, like I said, the tank junglers, so like Sejuani or even stuff like Zac and stuff like that. So you clear faster than they do, and you're also far stronger, you know, by having 6 abilities at your disposal. So just remember that your early game is your by far the strongest point on Elise, so remember to abuse it and you'll absolutely crush games.